So every year around this time, I get asked the same question, and it's how do you stay consistent with your money all year long? Not just during January or during a reset, but on a random Tuesday in April, all throughout the summer spending season, and when things are feeling, maybe a little bit tough. There's a lot of personal finance jargon on the internet, but here at Break Your Budget, we cut through the crap and focus on getting the basics right. The honest answer here is that I don't rely on the push or momentum that we feel at the top of the year. I don't reinvent my finances every year, and I definitely don't set a million different goals. I use the same 5-step system every single year, and it's designed to be boring and realistic and repeatable, and that's why it works. So today, I'm going to walk you through the exact system that I use, and you can steal it and make it your own. The reason why this system works is because it's grounded in reality, and it helps remove the emotional decision making when it comes to your money. But beyond that, it creates clarity before you feel like you need to hold yourself accountable, which is key because it's hard to feel accountable when you don't really know what you're doing. And the beauty of it is that once it's set, you don't have to constantly be thinking about money. You just have to hold yourself accountable to checking in on it once a week. So with that, let's just get right into it. So the first step of this process is creating my baseline budget for the year. This is non-negotiable, and I have talked about it in prior videos, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it today. But before I think about saving more or investing more or doing better, I need to have a clear and realistic picture of what my budget looks like on a regular month. And that's where a baseline budget comes into play. The purpose of it is not to be aspirational or to create a picture of what your finances could look like on your best month yet. What you want to identify is who you are and what you spend on an average month. What I do is I create what I call a zero-based 3-bucket budget. And this allocates out all of my income that I take home every month towards an essential expense. So that's like my baseline cost to exist, financial goals. So we'll talk about those later. And then non-essential expenses, which are all of my discretionary spends. I start the process by listing out what my monthly essential expenses are by category, and this has actually gotten a lot easier for me to do year over year because I've been tracking my expenses for so long that more often than not, I'm just taking my budget from last year and carrying it over into the current year. Usually too, as part of this process, I've already gone through and done my spending reflection from the prior year, so if there are changes that I need to make, I already know what they're going to be. I create this budget using my favorite tool, the Personal Finance Dashboard, and I designed it to make creating a budget like this super easy. It's always something that I do during January. At this point in the year, I've actually already put together my 2026 baseline target budget. So I know exactly how much money I'm going to be aiming to spend month to month, but also by the end of the year in total. What I do with this budget is I use it as my starting point. So at the end of every month, when I'm thinking forward to the next month, I'll go in and make small adjustments based off of new plans or new things that have come up. If you're interested in seeing this in action in 2026, next week, I'm going to be posting my January monthly money review. So that is going to be a real life example of how I make those adjustments on a monthly cadence. What creating this baseline budget does is it eliminates the need to have to go in and create a brand new budget every month. This ultimately makes the regular maintenance of having a budget significantly easier. So if you're someone who's like, ugh, that monthly budgeting process just seems so cumbersome, you really only need to do it one time. The key is you have to have a tool that forecasts your budget out for the full year so that you don't have to go back in and redo it every month. Anyways, like I said, stay tuned for next week, but I'll also make sure that I link up one of my more recent monthly money reviews if you're interested in checking those out in the meantime. Moving on to step number 2, this is actually my personal favorite part of the process. I will rerun my financial independence numbers. Once I know what my life is going to cost me today in the present, which is what I figured out in step number 1, I'll take some time to actually zoom out. What this does is it helps me prioritize my financial goals for the year so that I can properly plug in what I want to be working on and which goals I want to focus on first. Lately, my personal financial goals are very heavily centered around retirement and ultimately becoming work optional, as I've been on my financial independence journey for quite some time. And this is really because I just never want to have to go back to a corporate job. So I'm doing everything in my power while I am young to build up as much wealth as I possibly can to hopefully avoid the reality of going back to a traditional job, which is an environment that I just really did not do very well in. Anyways, if you have not calculated your financial independence numbers, I highly recommend you do so. And every year when you're putting together your annual plan, so that's your baseline budget and then your financial goals, I do recommend that you rerun your financial numbers and you rerun your financial independence plan, because goals and targets and desires do change, and an annual rerun is kind of essential. Something I've noticed too, the more I talk about financial independence, is I always get questions on like, well, what if your life changes? And I think that there is a myth that your financial independence plan needs to stay super rigid, but the whole purpose of financial independence is to have money to do the things that come up in your life. And really, this is a myth about financial independence in general, that you can't deviate from the plan whatsoever. But what I want to be clear about as part of this like broader planning process is like, my expenses change, my desires change, what I want out of my life changes. I'm not really in a phase of life at this point in time where things are steady and predictable year over year. And honestly, I don't know if that's ever what my life is going to look like. So it's in my own best interest to every year be recalculating and rerunning this plan so I can make the proper adjustments to my broader financial targets and goals for the year. The true goal with financial independence is less tied to like pressures and timelines and more tied to clarity around how much your life is going to cost year over year in perpetuity and how much you need to save annually in order to get there. So if you are someone who's interested in putting together a financial independence plan, I do really want to emphasize that it is something that should consistently stay fluid. But it's also kind of essential for creating any sort of longer term financial game plan, because it's really hard to maintain motivation and to save for your future when you don't really know how much money you're going to need and if what you're doing is enough. And then on top of that, you need to find a way to balance it with your shorter and longer term goals. And that's why it's so important to know how much money you need to be saving and investing for retirement. So again, you can prioritize those with the goals that are more present and in front of you. Anyways, I hope that that makes sense on why it's so important to be rerunning your financial independence numbers on a kind of frequent basis. But at the end of the day, when I know what my financial independence number is and where I am relative to achieving it, as well as if I'm in sort of like a maintenance mode or a building mode, it just makes it a lot easier for me to prioritize my goals all year long. And it also changes how I think about money decisions. Really what it does is it forces me to stop asking myself, like, can I afford this? And instead I start asking myself, is this aligned with the life that I'm currently building? And that really does reshape the way I think about spending and using my money. If you are interested in calculating your financial independence plan, I do have a calculator. I'll make sure it is linked in the description. I also have a couple of different financial independence videos that I recorded last year, so I'll make sure they're linked up on the screen. Moving on to step number 3, I set my consumption rules for the year. This is one of the most important steps too. I mean, all of these steps are important, but this is especially important if you are someone who struggles with impulse spending, over shopping, or you just want to generally consume less going into a new year. At the end of the day, I don't want to be negotiating with myself anytime I want to buy something. So essentially what I do is I pre-decide. I also want to be even more intentional, especially going into this year, about how I use my money. And I find that setting guidelines or rules really helps with making those day-to-day spending decisions without it being something that feels like so cumbersome and overwhelming. So some of these rules are set around like what I'm buying freely throughout the year. I've mentioned in some prior videos that I'm going to be spending a little bit more on travel and activities and circulating the city. Maybe what I'm not buying this year. So I have a handful of things that I'm trying to reduce my spend on, particularly clothes and beauty. And then some categories or expenses that I'm hoping to limit, where I still want to enjoy them, but just not as much as I have in the past. But really the goal with setting some consumption rules is to eliminate the decision fatigue and just make your day-to-day spending decisions easier. Really, when it comes to financial tips and advice that I see online, they're largely focused around how to save more or how to cut your expenses, but they're not teaching you how to properly spend your money. So if you're somebody who struggles with spending in general and consumption in general, I think starting with setting some spending guidelines or spending rules is really going to help you get a grip on what you're actually spending your money on. And it can help you refine your focus as you think about how you're balancing spending with prioritizing some of your other financial goals. Moving on to step number 4, this is when I define my financial priorities for the year. This is the step that most people skip, but it's actually the glue that pulls everything together and really clarifies what you're going to be focusing on all year long. Before I start tracking anything or holding myself accountable to anything, I want to decide what really matters this calendar year. A lot of the goals that I'm working on right now are related to financial independence. And so they're goals that are important, but they'll be important for many years to come, not just this year. And I don't really want to get super overwhelmed with how much money I need to be making and saving and investing for so many years to come. I really just want to focus on the 12 months that are in front of me, knowing though that they all sort of ladder up into this broader plan. And so what I like to do here really is set what I call a key financial objective. And it's really just a theme around what I'm focusing my financial goals and priorities on. So this could be, a year of refining how you shop and spend. It could be a year of investing and growing your wealth. It could be a year of building up your financial foundation. The reason why I encourage you to choose a key financial objective or like a key theme for your finances for the year is because when everything feels like a priority, nothing actually gets done. It becomes very overwhelming and it's hard to actually focus your attention. And what ends up happening when you do choose a key focus is the other layers have a tendency to fall in line and layer in naturally as you start getting into the process of sticking to your budget and tracking your expenses and moving money to your various goals and changing the way that you approach your finances in general. Which I know probably sounds like it's oversimplifying something that could feel really complicated, but trust me, in the next step, we'll talk about accountability, and that's how everything ties together. Anyways, I would love to hear what your key financial objective is for 2026 in the comments. Mine is really about investing and just building my wealth for one layer, and the other layer is around spending and refining intentionally, which I feel like I've said on this channel 1,000 times in the last couple weeks. The last step of my 5-step system is the accountability of it all. And this is really how you are bringing all of the planning and the forecasting and what we've talked about all throughout this video together. Ultimately, I am not somebody who's checking in on my finances every single day. I'm not obsessively looking at my credit card statements or my bank account or my net worth. I'm really just going in and updating and tracking my expenses once a week. And that's what I recommend you do, especially as you're just getting started or getting into a routine with your budget. I do owe you an updated weekly money routine that is on my list for February, so it's coming. But here's a quick overview of what my accountability routines look like in general. First is my simple weekly money check-in. So that's just tracking my expenses, doing some self-reflection, and then making adjustments to my budget. Again, I owe you guys a video on this, so stay tuned because it's going to be coming soon. In the meantime, though, I'll link my weekly money review video from last year, which is, going to be very, very similar. It's just from 2025, not 2026. Beyond the weekly money review, I also do a full monthly money audit where I will go through my finances for the full month. I'll set my goals for the next month and I'll make sure that all my money is in the right place. I'm going to be doing this again for the end of January and it's going to be going live next week, so stay tuned for that. I do think that seeing these accountability plans in action is very, very helpful for the sake of not only holding yourself accountable, but for actually knowing what you're supposed to do. And then I also have a couple of key points throughout the year where I'll do like a little bit of a recalibration. Generally, this is at the end of the calendar year going into the new year. So, doing my planning for the year ahead. And then it's also at the midpoint of the year. So when I'm doing my like June into July money review, I like to just relook at all of my financial goals and relook at my priorities and my key financial objective and make sure that things are still feeling aligned or make any updates or changes if, my priorities have changed, which sometimes they do. Anyways, these routines are intentionally designed to be easy to do and easy to maintain, especially if you use one of my tools, either the personal finance dashboard or the basic budgeting template. Those tools are literally designed to make tracking your expenses really easy. And also they're designed to make looking at and adjusting your budget variability super, super straightforward. So if you're looking for a tool or a budgeting system that you can actually stick to, I do recommend checking out one of those two tools. And again, they're always in the description. What I want to emphasize here is that if your financial routine or system requires consistent motivation, it is going to break the second that your life gets busy. So instead, I would default back to these 5 priorities. And it doesn't really matter when you're watching this video. You could be watching this in the middle of October. You can still go through these 5 steps to audit and review your finances for the months or years ahead of you. Most of the time, these things are staying consistent year over year. And that's why it's such a repeatable process and really easy to maintain, because I'm not boiling the ocean or learning how to do something new every single year. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, I would love to hear from you. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel, like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I will catch you in the next one.